Aloha kako, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm excited to continue our Confessions of Speakers series. As a housekeeping note, these will be housed on our YouTube channel for if you miss it. My name is Vincent Kimura. I'm with the University of Hawaii Office of Innovation and Commercialization under Vice President Vasil Sermos and Director Stephen Arbach. I'm one of the many members within the OIC office whose mission is to support the very talented faculty, staff, and students across the UH system. We help make their ideas a reality through patents, licenses, and startups. I'm super humbled today to have two very seasoned entrepreneurs and experts from the two largest crowdfunding platforms. And before I begin, I want to quickly mention some other things. Our program has recently rebranded, so we are now called High Tide. So if you are a faculty entrepreneur, you know someone, please feel free to share this information, provide an incubator program that's 12 to 24 months, funding, mentorship, and other perks. Applications open up soon, and then we will launch our next cohort in November. A couple of things in terms of Startup Paradise. If you don't already know, we have quite a few support ecosystem partners here. If you're looking for a program or funding or just funding, it's a growing community, and I'm looking forward to adding WeFunder and Republic to this list. Also, a couple other housekeeping items. Our next Confessions of is with Rick Gerard, who lived in Hawaii for many years, and he actually relocated back to the Bay Area. He's a pretty awesome guy. He supports a lot of Hawaii companies around the biggest challenge as an entrepreneur, which is finding, hiring, and firing. So encourage you all to tune into that one. And then, of course, we have in October a couple of annual conferences, HCDCs, as well as our offices. One last note is our partners from the National Security Innovation Network are posting the follow-on cohort for Hack for Defense, so for fall. So Engineering 401, it's pretty awesome. I have seen a lot of the different students and teams go through this program. And another note, spring we have Hack for Environment, which is GEO 468. So please, if you're interested, find more information on that. And again, if you're willing to contact us, please do reach out. Okay. So, gentlemen, for those of you who have or are ready to execute on your dreams of being an entrepreneur or need some mentorship and funding, one of the biggest challenges, especially as a startup founder, is funding, of course. So I'm really excited to share the expertise and background from these two individuals. I'm not going to introduce them, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Ben, John, thanks so much for joining us. Could you tell us about yourself, where you're from, what led you on this journey to support startup founders through crowdfunding?
Sure, John, you want to go first, buddy?
Sure, happy to. Aloha, everybody. Trying to just blend in with my Hawaiian shirt. I think Ben's trying to do the same over there. We're both based over here on the East Coast. I'm down in New York. My career helping out entrepreneurs started out roughly 12 years ago, I would say, when a company called Indiegogo actually found me. I was at a dinosaur of a company that was helping out with a whole bunch of getting media onto different platforms. And Indiegogo was like, hey, you should come over. We're doing this whole crazy thing called crowdfunding, very much at the infancy of it. At that point, I was employee number 21 and was the first person ever out there to help do outreach and bring entrepreneurs to the platform. No plan, no one ever did it before, super early stage, and no playbook at all. So very much the wild, wild west of crowdfunding. At that point, it really was rewards crowdfunding. And kind of took that platform from being very unknown to being something that's kind of a well-known thing in the tech space. So really did a lot of public speaking, a lot of events like this, to really kind of preach the gospel of what crowdfunding could possibly do for an entrepreneur. And built that from really two guys or girls in a garage that would be using it, up until like more mid-sized companies, and finally all the way up into enterprise companies. So companies that work like Coca-Cola, InBev, Sony, all of them started using the platform, which is really when my mind started to go crazy. I was like, hey, it was 4 years in and that's where we went. So really building out a team and a squad that was there. Indiegogo is really centered around like hardware products, and that's really where they are at this point. And kind of evolved from just doing crowdfunding to then doing a little bit more like in the e-commerce side. But I took that team, that was myself, all the way up to around 34 individuals. that were based here in the States, in the UK, France, Israel, and built out a whole organization in China, which then became like our second biggest market. Super crazy to do. As we went up into different levels of reward crowdfunding, we also then started to dip our toes into other forms of crowdfunding that came out. As I touched on, there was enterprise crowdfunding, so built a team for that. And we also started to dabble a little bit into equity crowdfunding, which we're going to talk about today. And that was towards the very beginning in the infancy of crowdfunding, when there was only $1 million cap and was super early stage and all that. Happy to dive into some more stories there and how that kind of evolved. After 7 years of building out that entire area, entire platform of Indiegogo, we went from like $10 million raised all the way up to like $2 billion raised. I then decided I was done with crowdfunding and moved on to a couple of different jobs. Was working at a company called Beta that was bringing products out. It was kind of like an Apple store with like an experiential retail. Pandemic hit, totally changed that. Went to Showfields, which is one of their competitors, which is like Instagram on steroids in real life. Super cool store, has a slide. Highly recommend it. But I was never a retail guy. And after thinking I wasn't going to come back to crowdfunding, Republic reached out and was like, hey, we're looking to kind of build this thing out a little bit more and do it. And super interested in the company. And I think they're doing a lot of different interesting things on the investment side. So that led me back here to kind of help out entrepreneurs again. And I obviously will dabble into this a little bit more, but like equity crowdfunding, I think is reward crowdfunding on steroids, which has like a bigger grasp on people, opens up the doors to a lot more companies that are out there instead of people just selling products or selling movie tickets or et cetera. Kind of is any kind of company could kind of handle it, could do it. But that's what brought me back here. I've been at Republic for roughly 5-6 months. Super excited, happy to chat about it, but that's a little bit about my story. Ben, over to you.
Yeah, I'll take it. I love it, man. That was a great story. That it was enjoyable to hear. Thanks so much. I think the one thing that you'll constantly hear throughout this entire presentation is that career paths are never linear. That we bounce around a lot, and that sometimes, even though we think we're going to dip out, sometimes they pull us back in. So it was nice to hear that story, dude. Thank you. Yeah. Also, hey, what's up, everybody? Ben Maitland-Lewis. Happy to be here. Thank you. Basically, lifelong entrepreneur. 22 years building venture-backed startups in a whole bunch of places. I grew up predominantly in Europe. To all European parents, I was the only American-born. I actually had an English accent until I was 15, and then I moved to Southern California, and I got stuck with this accent. But I've always kind of been in the arts. I'm a lifelong musician. And so I think ultimately I always ended up working around creative deviance. But as a drummer and sort of like a problem solver, I was always very impatient, and I wanted to ultimately be like, oh, I could do this so much better. Like, oh, I'm going to go do this, I need this for that or whatever. So started many businesses, but ultimately for the last 22 years, serious businesses. And I started those in college. I started them before college. I started them out of college. I worked in parallel with certain major companies. I was the marketing director for Sony BMG. And, I had a marketing agency and an artist management company. Ultimately then getting into technology as a result and a byproduct of that. I was always doing strategic partnerships and a whole bunch of stuff with major brands. I've always kind of been in the B2B space. It's fun personally. I like working with big brands with big budgets, and we can think really big. But ultimately that led me to build what turned out to be the industry's first DAM platform, a digital asset management platform for the entertainment industry that got bought by Universal Music Group back in 2015. And then I started another company by mistake. It was actually to save a party. What happened was that I was throwing some big startup events and everything, and I got Bacardi to drop $8,000 on a photo booth sponsorship. $1,500 was going to the photo booth. $6,500 was going to the bars tab. It was in Boston, and they couldn't fit the big photo booth through the front door of, we've got a lot of old buildings here, and they couldn't fit it through the front door of the event, the night of the event. And I had to very quickly come up with a solution. Otherwise the party was going to kind of turn south very quickly. And so we came up with, this is in 2013. So it was actually while we were, simultaneously doing this other company. And we ended up using like an iFi card plugged into a camera that would like take a photo. It would send it, wirelessly to a laptop in a backpack held open with a PVC pipe. It landed on a folder in the desktop. We wrote a script to duplicate it to another folder where we could put a photo on it, and then it would sync really slowly through Dropbox so that we could show that photo on an iPad and then email them the link. So it wasn't instant, but it was pretty instant. And thus a new company was born. And the next 10 years of my life like took off in that direction. And that turned into a really successful company. It was invested in by Y Combinator. We were doing about 100,000 shoots a year. We had 12,000 contractors all over the country, working with some of the biggest brands, from WeWork to Warner Brothers to NBC to HBO to NASCAR to NFL, you name it. And that was a fun ride. And we ended up the pandemic also hit that pretty hard, which was kind of interesting, but we kind of chugged through it. And then we ended up forging an acquisition with one of our friendly competitors that was also a YC company that was global. They were based out of Australia. So they were able to mitigate sort of country by country reopenings versus like state by state. And it was the best path forward for our investors, our contractors, our clients, and everything else. So we did that. And the pandemic was my first forced vacation in 20 years. And it was a very interesting time for all, and especially for inner reflection. And my wife and I were also expecting our first child, who's now 3.5 months old. So there was this big transitional period, right? And naturally, of course, I probably wanted to start like 50 kids companies, but I told myself I'm not going to go into that route. So I went and I just kind of, posted out in the world, mainly in Bookface and a couple of areas, that, hey, like, this is what I've been doing forever. I like to solve problems, work with really fun people, have fun doing what it is, but I want to do fewer things better. That was kind of my philosophy, being in the trenches for 22 years as a founder. And we'll talk about this throughout, you wear many hats, not all of them you're good at. And so I really wanted to just wear the ones I was really good at. And our CEO from WeFunder hit me up, saw that, we had a chat. I joined within 24 hours. I was really blown away. On one end, I was irritated that I didn't know that they existed. I wasn't really privy to the whole Reg CF world. I was really head down doing the VC angel self-build bootstrap piece. I was just focused forward, on the companies. But as soon as I heard about it, I was on one hand, I was like irritated I didn't know about it. And on the other hand, I was like incredibly inspired to talk to as many founders as possible, to let them know that it is now a vehicle that they should absolutely take advantage of strategically. And especially after the laws changed in March 21, where you can now do, 5 million, one line on the cap. Like, there's no reason to not leverage Reg CF as part of a strategy going forward. And so I've been here for 9 months now as a founder and resident, on a very high level, talking to just really great founders and talking them through strategically how to leverage, if it's even good to leverage, the timing, how we would do it, roll it out. I'll pull together the armies to help execute and get it done. It's been probably one of the most rewarding experiences of my career. And it's been really good for the soul to just talk to founders all day and kind of chat with them through next steps, and let them know that they're not alone in the trench, and that we'll all figure this out together. So it's nice to be here today, also to talk in depth about this, because I'm a true believer now in the industry for sure, and it's only just getting started. 10 years in the making, but just really taking off. So here I am.
Thank you, gentlemen. And full disclosure, I think the real reason why you guys wanted to join on this is you can wear your Aloha shirts. So I appreciate that. Okay, I'd like to set the stage. I think for a lot of us, especially in our ecosystem here, Reg CF, like all this crowd stuff, that's new to us. And again, as you both alluded to, the evolution around Kickstarter, Indiegogo, all these things. Could you both talk a little bit about your experiences through this? I mean, WeFunder helped literally write the legislation for this. Could you give us some groundwork, some landscape around this, please?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, it takes an army to do anything, right? But for us, like, we started back in April of 2012 when we started a giant petition that got picked up, and we worked with the Senate and Congress to get it included in the Jobs Act, where they finally got it through there. And then we got into Y Combinator in January of 2013, and we're able to just continue to chug through working with the government, getting things working, starting to experiment with different deal flows and everything. Started because our founder just was irritated that he couldn't invest in his buddy's companies, and the accreditation process in the US is pretty hectic. So started with that petition, got picked up hard, worked, with the SEC forever and a day. It finally rolled out in 2016. And then again, it's been changing and evolving and everything else. So here we are now, 10 years in. And the big major rule changes that I think make this a viable option for everybody to consider finally matriculated and rolled out in March of 21. So it's been a decade of building and doing it correctly. And all of us in the space have played a part in that. Sure, it takes a spark, but Rome wasn't built in a day. And again, I think we're finally at an inflection point and a new paradigm in the industry. But anything with the government, SEC, FINRA, you name it, takes a long time. And so, yeah, I mean, that's really where it originated and started. And I'm excited to see where we are now and where it's going to go in the next 5 years, for full disclosure.
Yeah, adding to what Ben said there, I could add a little bit more in from when I joined on the reward side. I remember when I was interviewing for the job at Indiegogo, I was speaking to Slava, the CEO of Indiegogo, and he was literally, it was like 30 minutes. It was a phone call, and he's like, "Hey, you got 30 minutes. I'm about to go meet up with this guy Obama, and I'm going to go speak about this law I'm going to try to get implemented." Indiegogo started with trying to become an equity crowdfunding platform. The laws just weren't in place to actually make that happen, so they had to go the rewards route. That was there. I think that they did a lot of good things. I think both Indiegogo, Kickstarter did, but I do think that crowdfunding rewards term actually gets muddied when you think about everything that happened in equity. After a couple of years of being at Indiegogo, we finally got the Jobs Act through, which was great. WeFunder was there, Republic was there, Indiegogo was there. It was this big push to actually make this platform, to make this viable. The initial law was not, I think, what everyone wanted, but at least allowed to start building some foundation that was there. As I touched on, like Indiegogo was doing it in the beginning, but there was limitations on like only raising $1 million. It was very limited on actually who could do it. It was actually more complicated than probably it was worth. Thank God we're not there anymore. But that was kind of the bigger push. And I think that we've all been united together as platforms to try to continue to evolve that law, to get more companies to be involved and get more investment opportunities, both for companies and for retail investors that are out there. So that's kind of a little bit of the evolution going in. And we were I think all the companies were at the forefront of making that happen. But it was a very interesting story. Dealing with anything that has to deal with Congress and laws gets more complicated. But now I think is actually a very prime time to actually have a conversation like this, to be like, here's why it's very fruitful to use a platform. Here's why this could be useful for different companies. And just a very good solve for kind of all companies of all different areas. Like on the reward side, it was very limited to like, you have to have a product really, or you could use a GoFundMe that's like more of a personal raise. Equity opens up a lot more doors, like B2B companies, all of these that are out there. Happy to dive into them, but I think that is the evolution of how we got to this place right here. Plus an email from Vincent.
Yeah.
That's all you need. That's all you really need. Okay. Well, thanks so much for laying the landscape here. Ben, a question for you. Looking at all the other platforms out there, I'm really intrigued with this whole community rounds concept. Could you talk more about that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, being in this already for a decade, right? And people, and as you know, right, it's not people's jobs to keep up with Reg CF laws and law changes. I didn't. So, really community rounds was our mission to essentially rebrand regulation crowdfunding, or just crowdfunding in general, around this whole notion that you can build a stronger, more resilient company with your community and customers at the heart. And it was, another way to usher in the next decade of where all of us are working together to go. You still have some people that, think of crowdfunding as where you go if you can't get venture capital, or if, your product's not there yet or whatever, where we firmly believe that no, especially now with the new laws, like, we have, people investing side by side with major VCs and major angels and accelerators and everything else is coming out. And so we, our mission, we're a public benefit corp, and like our mission is just to get more founders funded and democratize access to capital. And, we want to get 20,000 founders funded by the end of the decade. We're at a little over 2018 right now. And what better way to get through anything or build a stronger company than with your community at its core. So communityround.com is really just our initiative to get founders to sign a pledge to at least put a portion of their future raises to the community, as well as for community members to sort of start a petition to get their favorite companies to open a community round. But it's really our way of rebranding the industry ATOL. It's not just a WeFunder initiative. We believe in what Republic's doing, what Start Engine's doing, what some others are doing, where at the end of the day, if you're inviting your customers and your community and your true believers in, that essentially that is a community round. You're not just running like a little crowd fund. It's much more important and much more impactful than that. And we've seen some really great use cases of how having your customers at your core or your community or whomever else, because again, you can accept investments globally from accredited and unaccredited investors. So you're building an army of evangelists and people that are involved, and humans just want to be involved with something. They want to make a difference. And if you include them, then you can really take your company to new heights very quickly and organically. And it's so community round.
Yeah, I think a lot of that actually bleeds from reward crowdfunding. I think the actual term crowdfunding over the 7 years, I'm super proud of everything I did at Indiegogo, but getting all that insight that came in there, like some products didn't fulfill, some things were, didn't go as well as they should have. Some companies folded. There was a lot of like stories that turned at one point, basically halfway through my event, my time at Indiegogo, where actually the crowdfunding term was no longer super sexy. It was actually like, that doesn't sound as great as it could possibly be. Interesting thing is that enterprise companies became more interested at that point, but more kind of mid-level companies or mid-sized companies were like, crowdfunding is like for really early stage companies, probably not for me. And I think that is kind of carried through. So even then we kind of killed that term. It was like, hey, we're more, for Indiegogo, it's more like, hey, we're a pre-launch or pre-order platform. Like you want to come and use us, and this is how you start gaining interest in going forward. It's something that at Republic, we really don't use the word crowdfunding either. That's there. It's part of the law, so it's always referred to. It's regulation CF. You have to mention it. Like it's not something you could kind of get away from. But we see it much more of as a way to like do customer engagement and to have different tools to allow other people to invest that they just didn't have before. So I think that's like something that's like been grandfathered in. And I think that WeFund has done a good job with that rebrand that's there, because I think that is just a problem, that there's a stigma around that term that I think all of us are trying to get through. Crowdfunding, you really have to think of it not as that, and not as like a product I might not have gotten, or not something that wasn't as quality as I thought it was going to be. It might have just been more of a flashy video, compared to actually like an investment that you have in there from a company that you've bought from before, or someone that you personally know, or something that you've seen. Like, oh my God, that's something I didn't think I'd have the chance to until it would actually IPO. It's a really cool time to actually be able to have that kind of engagement. I think that's all things that all different equity platforms are trying to navigate right now.
Yeah, can I jump in really quick? I appreciate what he said, because he also mentioned customers, right? And it's like, there are many different types of companies these days that leverage it, because it's now expanded from just like product centric, crowdfunding essentially. And now it's strategic, it's equity crowdfunding, it's even debt, if you do revenue shares, things like that for creative projects, Main Street, whatever you want to call it. But, the majority of everything we do, probably for you guys as well, is equity. And, it's exciting to see, especially since March 21, when the laws matured again to that 5 million mark, the types of companies that are leveraging this, right? And it's like, I kind of put them in 4 buckets, although I'm probably narrowing it down, but either way, you've got your Series Bs that are hyper capitalized, like your Mercuries, your Levels, and those guys that, have money from Andreessen and whomever else. And they just open up 5 million just for their customers to say, thank you, like, come with us. Let's go. You brought us here. You got us here. Let's do this together. Strengthen numbers, like hoorah, right? Then you've got like your Series A's that are also pretty well capitalized, doing really well, but they want to galvanize their early adopters and gain access to new customers at the same time while marching forward, capitalized. Then you've got your accelerator types that want to be able to, consolidate and accept a bunch of smaller check sizes and stack them on top of each other, and then gain access to new customers while keeping their cap clean. And then you have startups that just want to leverage like the simplicity and sophistication of an SPV model or something to be able to go run an actual friends and family customer community round, early influencer round, and go to town, right? And so it's exciting to see where that's going, because it is either for capital raising, or it's marketing, or it's both. And it's cool to see where that's going. And no two companies are the same, but there's a way to leverage strategy for any company, and that's part of the fun that, honestly, I think John and I both have, is figuring out strategy with companies of like, how would we do this, and then help them do it.
Well, that helps me jump right into the meat of this whole confession series, because I'd love for you guys to share stories, whatever. You can scrub names for whatever reason, but a lot of these folks here, especially in Hawaii, they're looking at crowdfunding as a potential path for both funding as well as marketing. Can you both talk about some of the don't do's or the do's? Like, how do you figure this out?
Good question. I would always say, like, speaking to an expert that's there. There's people that, obviously there's me and Ben on this call right now. There's whole teams that are behind us on the platform that work specifically with founders to kind of navigate this. And like, what is the right amount to try to raise? What is the right regulation to go through? How do you actually navigate this world? Because there's a whole, it's a black hole that's there. And it's, I think, part of why this conversation is happening. But the biggest thing is to start building up your community, start seeing if there is engagement, like see what stage you are. There's a lot of companies that come to us that's super early and like, hey, I want to raise $5 million. So this other company do it. And it's like, actually, you don't have, you just launched, you don't have a product. Like, chances of you doing that might not happen. But if we set expectations correctly, you could run a great campaign on any platform. Like, just think of that all the way through. How are you going to message it? What are you actually looking to accomplish? As Ben said, you can either go in for funds, you could go in for marketing, you could go for customer engagement, all those different components, and build out a strategy specifically tailored towards that. I think if you're looking through it through that lens, you're going to have the best actual experience. I would also look at this not just as a funding portal. I would look at it as more of like a social media platform where you're actually able to engage with your customers, actually able to get feedback. Like, some of our best campaigns are people that are actually answering all the questions, that are sending out updates, that are doing webinars weekly to be like, hey, let's actually see what's going on. If you think of it through that lens, you're going to get the best engagement, instead of, hey, I'm just going to throw this thing up there and out of nowhere I'm going to raise $1 million. If you think of it that way, you're going to have a rough experience and it's going to be a rough onboarding. But if it's like, hey, strategically, I want to accomplish X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to then do X, Y, and Z through it, not only are you going to raise the most funds, you're going to get the most engagement. You're actually going to have people that are much more inclined to stick with your brand. That's the thing that's also different than like reward crowdfunding. Someone sticks there till they get the product, then like, okay, cool, got my thing. Here, it's like, I want to see this company succeed and go in there for the long term. And maybe they'll run another campaign, they'll invest again. Maybe they'll tell their friends about it and they'll go out and they'll buy a product, or they'll download your app, or they'll do whatever that's there. If you look at it through that lens of all those long-term gains, I think that is the way that you set yourself up for the best amount of success that is there on any platform.
I'm going to tail off that. That was super well said. So I'm not going to repeat any of that. But going kind of backwards from what you were talking about is that, yes, like, the customer engagement side is really cool. A lot of people, they don't, like, founders are kind of this elusive person that like nobody really gets to see. They just see the brand and they engage with the brand. Never ever do they really get that close to the founder and ask these real questions and really start to engage with the brand in a new, meaningful way. So leveraging these platforms to be able to do that, to grow your customer base, to turn them into evangelists, to answer their questions, to improve your product, to improve your marketing, your go-to-market, whatever it is. You can leverage these platforms to do that in a really authentic way. And some of the most successful founders that I've seen leverage these platforms that have done 1 to multiple raises on these platforms. Some of them do it as part of their ongoing growth strategy, because you can raise up to 5 million per year. It's not a race to the top. Some people just carve out, allocate 500 grand, maybe $1 million, maybe 250. It's like milestone funding. Sometimes it's like a bunch of stuff. But you can launch multiple times up to that cap. There's other things. We don't need to get into contracts. But the point is that if the more that you engage them early on, the more you learn from them, and then they become true believers. They bring more customers, and it keeps going from there. We have a lot of customers that I think of, the ones that are most successful, leverage them for early product development, feedback on new product launches, maybe referral programs that they'll roll out. There was this one company that was really smart, and they wanted to get picked up nationally by like Home Depot and some other big box stores. And they leveraged their investors to like print out a PDF and go to those stores and actually be like, hey, do you have this? Like, I'd like, what's up? And they got picked up nationally. It's really up to you to leverage them, because they're there to do that. Some people don't, and that's fine. But they are there to support, and they're more than happy to do so. So, tacking on to, John said, like, I fully endorse that plan. And then going back to sort of the beginning, as you're thinking about this stuff, I think timing is really important. I talk to a lot of founders whereby they might think of Reg CF at the point at which they've already exhausted their personal networks or friends and family or something. It's, somehow, right? And then this ends up being a bolt-on versus a strategic pillar of a strategy. And then they look to these platforms to basically bring them everybody to fill up their round. And of course, we all have large networks. Like, we have like 1.7 million or something, just investors, only 6,000 or so of which are accredited. It's like, people want to invest in your company, but there needs to be some traction. There needs to be like what's the next stage? Where are we going? People invest in founders. They believe in mission. They invest in missions, but it has to be a good timing. So I would say, to kind of piggyback what John was saying, take a step back. If you are going to go look to raise some capital, engage community, build a community, do that piece, take a step back, look at how the platforms can support you in that, and start with them in mind from the beginning to figure out exactly how those all fit in play. And then it'll be a much smoother process for you. And then again, as you said, like, we all have teams that are here to support founders and the journey and figure things out and block and tackle next steps. But it is hard to fundraise, whether or not you're leveraging a platform or you're going out on your own. I think leveraging a platform, having done that now for 22 years, doing the boardrooms and, smoke-filled rooms, whatever you want to call it, right? Like, having a platform is nice because when you do also Reg CF, you're allowed for public solicitation. And there's a lot of cool strategies that you can do with that you can't do if you're just going the other route. And so in terms of mistakes, it's just timing, putting the cart before the horse, not having a product that has traction yet or that people can resonate with. But at the end of the day, it's also not for us to decide on that. It's the market's job to decide on that. We will sort of help coach on whether or not now is a good time or whether or not you should go hit one more milestone and then come back and we can then go together.
Yeah, but I would see running a campaign also as a way for you to extend your brand's reach and to tell your brand story instead of just doing like an Instagram ad and sending someone to a website or to whatever. It's really like, hey, I get to actually have like a real moment, be able to have like a video and be able to speak to actually what I'm trying to accomplish here. I think that's like a big component. Making a polished video is always a big plus. It's always like, oh, there's actually a human element behind this company. Is actually the founder. It's very hard to have a conversation with them, to tell what your story is a big push. One thing that Ben was saying that I'd like to just add on, I guess we're going to keep on piggybacking on top of each other, which is not a problem. If you look like you have a strong back. But like the one thing I would say there is like, there is work in the beginning. Like it is you bringing your initial traction, whether that's friends, family, etc. Because a platform, we both have significant audiences that's there, but you're only gonna see the best results is if you're able to actually validate your own campaign. People are looking at this through an investor's lens. So if you're able to bring some of your own traction, like, hey, we raised $25,000, $50,000, whatever on your own, it then looks a lot better. And it would then bring in stranger dollars and people that are just like looking over the platform to then actually invest instead of it being at $0. So the first thing would be like, where are you going to find that initial traction? Who do you feel confident in? And then being like, oh, great, now we're ready to do a bigger push to go wider. That's one big thing you want to think through, because if it's not a great brand look to be like, hey, here's my great product, here's my great company I've been working on for years, and then there's no one there, it's crickets, to then be like, hey, everybody check it out, because it'd be like, oh, this is a great video, but no one else has actually invested their dollars. How am I going to be the first person? The thing is really breaking through that barrier and having that initial traction. Again, that would come through friends, family, customers, whatever you think of. That would then help get to that next stage that then helps blossom. And then when you're in front of the We Fund a Republic, whatever audience, they're more likely to then engage as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's human nature, right? Like, a lot of people that are on these things, they want to invest in founders, they want to be a part of tomorrow, but they're not all of them are seasoned investors that are going to like dig through your EBITDA and all this other stuff. They're going to look at, what's the mission, what's the vision, do I like the founder, and have other people invested. And so, yeah, the more momentum you can have coming in to seed it, the faster, more successful you're going to have as a raise throughout.
One of the things we both talked about when we were kind of debriefing on this thing, going back to the don'ts, I think is a really big thing, is you both talked about expectations and setting expectations. Can you both talk about that?
Yeah, happy to talk about it a little bit. Yeah, on the don't side, it's really like you have to realize what type of company you are at what stage. I think that's the best thing, is to set realistic targets that you put yourself in the position to succeed. This is a very public setting to put your company in. So you really want to think about like, all right, I am a pre-seed company, I'm early, like should be lower goals and like lower achievements. And this helps me get to the next stage that's there. Instead of looking at like what just the maxes are, whether it's 1 million, 5 million, et cetera. It's like, actually, I need like $250,000 to get to the next milestone for my company. That means a lot. Or if I get this to be tagged on, I could then go to a VC and showcase that I already have momentum because I have 100 investors that are there and people that are like very into my product and very into there. That's the biggest thing to really look at in the beginning, to not hit the launch button before you're ready, to start doing as much research and as many conversations as you can as possible before. That's probably the biggest of the don'ts, is like to just be prepared and just like look at yourself in the mirror and like do a realistic component. These are a different type of investor that would be there. The people that do look over the page, do want to see like what the financials are going to be, and do want to say, like, hey, this is something that I agree with. Like with us, we see a lot of companies that are like in the fintech space, but especially like the sustainability and green tech space, do very well because like, hey, this is an investment into the future. And like I would investigate like which platforms probably align the best with that, and like which way the audience actually would be the best in that component. Those are things you really want to think through as you're making a decision to jump into the equity crowdfunding space.
I got nothing. That was perfect. That was perfect. I mean, you know, I see a lot of founders too sometimes who, well, I think, you know, for me, I've always been like a chief optimist, right? That's been kind of like my thing. I'm always like front and center, fixed bayonet, let's go, right? Being here, I think it's important to be pragmatic in things that are going down and not sort of over promise, under deliver type scenario. And I think, you know, the biggest thing that I like to talk to founders about sometimes though, is because there's always strategy for things. There's things that you have to do versus not do. There's things that you have to look at to ensure that you get this position correctly, you're communicating, you know, correctly. Again, this is a tool. We're both platform intermediaries to support in this capacity and make you be in a position to be able to collect and raise capital globally easily. But like, honestly, like, this is gonna sound kind of altruistic, but like, don't not believe in yourself. Like, you know, it's like, I work with a lot of founders specifically coming out of like the bio space or maybe the university realm and a few other places where they haven't yet, they're not necessarily like your sales and marketing founders that are just like, I'm here, you know. They might be like really smart engineers like that have created some new breakthrough technology and they're trying to figure out how to commercialize it, whatever. Talk to, like, do your research on the platforms, figure out what vibe fits you best, because we're all in it together. Like we're all trying to help founders get to the next stage, you know, and figure out what works for you and then work with them. Don't, you know, not leverage the platform experts in some of these places to really help you with your round and your raise and strategically get started, because it's lonely doing it. It's vulnerable. You got to put yourself out there, like John said. And there are people in these companies that can like talk you through it and really help figure out from outside of the trench, looking in, what available assets that you might have at your disposal that you might not be thinking because you're just dealing with it all day, or you're not thinking of it from that lens.
I would also add, like, don't be shy. And I would also recommend doing your research. That's in there. There's actually a whole ecosystem around equity crowdfunding, whether it's agencies or lawyers, everyone else to help out. I would also look into that as well as you're like gearing up to potentially run a campaign.
Well, that segues really beautifully into, okay, I've got a company and, you know, I've been doing my research and due diligence and I want to raise and I want to look at a platform. So John, I know that Republic does a lot of really cool stuff in the crypto space, real estates, all these other kind of things. You know, tell me about, you know, myself as a, you know, academic founder. You know, what are some of the things I need to know from Republic versus WeFunder? Let's start with you, John.
I don't know if we want to make it an end-or, but Republic wants to be an investment platform for everybody that's there. So we have a lot of different tools and a lot of different assets that's there. Our core part of the business is really around Reg CF and startup companies. We're really industry agnostic. So we work with B2B companies, B2C companies, everything that you could imagine. We do have other tools that help out on the real estate side for crypto, which is a totally different business. Happy to talk about that a little bit, but that's very interesting. Let's keep it there. Web3 I think is great. But we also have like different instruments for like bigger stage companies and other ways you could possibly work with them. Republic has a very founder friendly instrument that we use. It's called our CrowdSafe, which is very much similar to the Y Combinator Safe. I'm guessing most people are kind of familiar with it. But it's a very issuer-friendly instrument that helps them go to the market on our platform in a very seamless way. And that's one of our biggest pushes that comes there. But I believe we do have a product that is for every single company, and we're continuing to build upon those. I would really like push it, probably really for this conversation as well. It's not just to speak to everybody, but our core business really is the CF business that's there. We see a lot of growth there, a lot of startups and a lot of companies that use that will then use other instruments as they continue to grow. And that's kind of the bigger play that we're making.
Same here. I mean, it's really, we're also just industry agnostic. I mean, the amount of companies that you can see raising at any given time is actually really exciting. I mean, there's from a hot sauce company to an aerospace company to a, unmanned aerial vehicle checking for methane gas leaks to, CPG brands to, cancer fighting drugs. I mean, it's all over the place. It's actually one of the exciting things. I mean, just go check out our Explore page and just see these companies. We use an SPV model, which is a special purpose vehicle. It's nice and clean. Everybody basically gets filled into one big bucket on your cap table. So you can have thousands of investors. They only take up one line on your cap table, and then you assign a lead investor to have the voting right for that SPV when it converts down the road. And you need to actually have like a shareholder vote. We offer preferred shares, super clean. 90% of our investment vehicles are safes or convertible notes. We're a YC company, so of course we use just your standard YC safe, but we can leverage any investment contract that you put forth. Really, the process is that we would work with you first, figure out kind of what available assets you have, things like that, talk you through like what your valuation is going to be, what you want to offer, if you're going to do early bird terms, if you're not, kind of figure out a rollout strategy for that. We have this thing that's really unique called testing the waters. So you could essentially go live right away, like same day if you wanted to, and start accepting investment reservations from the public while you asynchronously work together to do the back-end paperwork, which you have to do for every platform. And that allows you to sort of start seeing privately, only people who have the link can start to invest. And so it's kind of like your community, your customers invest first before the general public. And it allows you to start seeding that and get it out there and starting to get feedback on your investments and really get a temperature reading of, if this is going to work or not, if the messaging is sort of resonating with your people or not, and get going. Because for all the platforms, we all work under under a sort of SEC and FINRA laws and such. And, we have to file a Form C with 2 years of financials traditionally. And those are either reviewed or audited, depending on the amount that you're going to raise. And the benefit, I think, of the process that our guys built was just that you could get started right away, do it down the road prior to really going like super live. It's to each his own, but we're kind of like, we're into speed and figuring out if it's going to be something that's successful or not, and we go from there. But yeah, I mean, we all do it very complementary. You just got to pick, what flavor you like,
Yeah, it's similar things, and that the part of that is because of the regulations that's out there.
Right.
I think that Republic and WeFunder look at things in a similar light. Some of the things that Ben alluded to, we do as well. Like we obviously utilize the safe. We have one line item in a cap table, so super easy for everybody that's there. Testing the waters we do as well. I guess one thing that is like slightly different is we do bring like diligence up to the front. So we have like a lot more conversations on like financials and all of that. Like that's one of the biggest tentpoles that we have as a platform, to really make sure that everything is being as trustworthy as possible on the platform. So basically you would apply, you chat with a member of my team, and then diligence would come on. During that process, you actually are able to build out the testing the waters reservation page to make sure that everything is good. And you can start building up that community, as Ben alluded to. But it's similar type of process and similar kind of speed to market is what we're shooting for.
I've got some questions scrolling, but I have one question for the both of you before we kind of launch into that, is around expectations of timing. And full disclosure, when in my last company, we did a crowdfunding campaign in Republic. So, and it was successful. But, you know, from what I understand, when we went through it, things have changed a lot in terms of what to expect. Can you both talk to me about what a normal, let's just say a range for a startup entrepreneur can expect on both your platforms?
Yeah, we chatted about this a little bit yesterday, Vincent, and that was before my time. So I wasn't there for that campaign, but super happy to hear that you were successful in Republic. Happy to bring you back whenever you want. I think your timeline was a little bit longer that was there. I think it was around like 3 months, which is a little bit crazy in the whole space, to be totally honest. Not because I've joined, but since I've joined, that has shortened significantly. And I'm not taking all credit for any of that. We are the time to market is now like less than half of that. So it's more like in a month and a half that's there. But that's actually to go physically 100% live on the platform. That's for like your average one. We are able to get a testing the waters page up within like a day. Like it actually be super quick. So you can start gaining that interest and start getting people on board. So that timing then changes. Then once you're live, you know, we could have campaigns that are as short as like 21 days. It's actually like the law that's as short as it could possibly be. I know there's like more like 3 months or so. So that's kind of like how long a duration would possibly take. So, you know, doing an application, having a testing the waters page up the next day, then probably going physically live about a month and change after, and then writing it out for at least another 21 days. That's usually what a timeline would look like on Republic.
Pretty similar. Yeah, pretty similar. You know, we just kind of, you know, again, we get a page right up there same day or the next day, make it look super good. You obviously want it to look good, right? But I mean, you could technically just have like a pretty simple page going up there with some basic information, investments, deck, whatever, whatnot. At that point, you start circulating it around while you're working with a CPA to get everything handled. When you aren't testing the waters and people start making investment reservations, that money is actually taken out of their accounts, but in escrow, like they are fully making an investment. It just doesn't go into like public view yet. And then once you file that Form C, just like John mentioned, like you got a minimum 21-day hold period. That's standard industry for the SEC. After which period of time, you know, you can either keep the campaign going or you could close it depending on what you need. With the testing the waters thing coming out of that to public, that's the good part where you're kind of like privately working up that big bucket like we talked about to get momentum and get things rolling so that when you do roll public, you've got that momentum, you've already got that sort of metric that's already big, people will jump onto that, you keep it going. And then you have different raise amounts. We care about minimum target goals versus maximum because again, it's not a race to the top. It's what you need strategically for milestones to get you to the next phase, to do what you need to do. So every campaign is different. But one of the things that I do like as well is that, you know, once you've done the Form C and everything else and you hit your minimum target goal, we can do a disbursement and then we can kick out that first, you know, bit of capital so you can deploy that capital and then do a rolling raise until you feel like stopping or until you hit your end goal. Because at the end of the day, stepping back again, right? Like fundraising is not the job, right? Like it is a job when you're doing it. And, you know, a founder's job is to get the money, get the right people, set the vision, right? But I think both of our platforms work very diligently to be able to help you raise that capital as quickly as possible so that, and then deploy that capital as quickly as possible so that you can get back to work. Because it's not fun to be stuck in this just long sludge of fundraising. That being said, some companies do keep it open for a while and they leverage it as part of their customer acquisition and retention strategy, kind of like ongoing, but that's not the norm. The norm is like, let's get in, let's raise, let's engage, let's get out, get back to work.
For
one thing to just clarify that I said before that I just want to make sure I said correctly is just Republic is one line item in summary on the cap table. I don't know if I said in summary, so just to be clear. Sorry about that.
Yeah, same deal. I got to say though, before March of 2019, 2021, before March of 2021, it was still messy. Everybody was a different line on the cap table. And we have some companies that have raised, you know, multiple times with us that prior to March 21, we're now doing like cap table mergers or cleanups or whatever it is, you know what I mean? Because some companies, you know, have like 700 lines on the cap table. And if any of you guys have had, like you pay attorneys or anybody to do cap table management, that's a little hectic. So that's another little caveat that when the law changed, it benefited everybody because now it's just nice and clean and really effective. So especially if you're thinking about, and I'm sure a lot of you will, sorry, John, post, Reg CF, and whether or not you keep Reg CF like in your ongoing campaign for, or strategy for like raising either annually or just once or whatever you want to do. When you continue to grow and you get institutional financing, if that's what you're going to do, or you're going to get private equity, whatever it is, having just one line on the cap table that represents what could be thousands of customers is incredibly powerful.
Amen. It's gotten so much better over the last couple of years. So
Yeah, I mean,
night and day.
Yeah, night and day.
Okay, we're wrapping things up. Giuseppe's got a question which is a bit thought-provoking. Could crowdfunding be used by academics to fund their research groups?
Well, I've seen, I don't know, because I don't know about research groups. I guess I don't know enough about research groups to give you a definitive answer. What I have seen are a lot of companies that have leveraged WeFunder that are obviously working with like, the Mayo Clinic or Johns Hopkins or certain university programs, and then they're leveraging it to help commercialize or bridge the gap to like clinical trials and stuff like that. Leah Labs is like one company that comes to mind where they were doing like blood cell therapy stuff, and they're working obviously within university context and then spinning that out, but they were really leveraging it to get to that next phase of either FDA approval or clinical or whatever, kind of marching to the top and offering it as equity. So you're coming in early, you're helping them continue to go, maybe roll out of the university and keep going from there. There's like a nuclear fusion company right now that, is on like their second or third raise, and they're coming out, they're still at the university level, but they're leveraging it to continue to invest in research and development and whatever else that you need to do, especially in that space. It's a very long, there's a lot to do before you get to commercialization. So I think going back to like milestone funding, that's a really good lever for that, to be able to take advantage of that, And then we have another company I'm just thinking at the top of my head is like they're at UC Berkeley, and it's a PhD student who's like working on this really cool project with like one of her PhD professors, and she wants to commercialize it. And she's thinking of like a Kickstarter versus WeFunder at this point. And we were able to sort of let her know the difference between like rolling out on like a product type of website, versus like getting people in as equity, and customers and everything else. And so we do see it in that capacity, but I'm not 100% like clear on a research group, how that would work.
John, you have any comments on that?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. That's there. Happy to discuss on a one-off, but it's not a direct line. We've had a lot of people do similar things to, as Ben said, of like raising for it and for other causes. But usually it's not a group setting, but there's always unique cases. And again, we have a lot of different instruments. Happy to chat and see if maybe there's a fit.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, well, kind of going back to what Ben was saying, I think there's a lot of potential, especially around ESG investing as it pertains to climate. And Hawaii does that really well, with renewable energies, whatnot, with oceans. Got some of the best research out here. And of course, again, who doesn't want to come to Hawaii to do the research? So
we're waiting for the flight.
Yeah.
We already have our shirts. We're ready to go, guys.
It's in the mail, guys. It's in the mail. Yeah.
But sure. Like again, like everybody wants to invest in the future for sure. I think also specifically to our times today, I'm seeing more and more people. I mean, we're seeing it too. I'm sure, doing your own research, you'll see how our industries are growing significantly. We've seen that we've had some pretty interesting, tumultuous times over the last few months with the markets and everything else, but those are public markets. We're doing a lot in private markets where people are able to really kind of, put in and invest in the future that they want to have, and have it not be fluctuated daily by, if Elon Musk tweets about this or Jamie Dimon tweets about that or whatever. It's like, let's invest in the founders that are going to build tomorrow and the future that we want to have. And our platforms are where you can really, really do that and make an impact.
We see that all the time in the comments of people, why they invested, and like, hey, I want to make a better world and do all of that. And that's one of the things that brought me back into the crowdfunding space, was to work with all of these amazing founders that are really moving the needle there. And you actually see that in the investment side. It's actually a real nice blend to see like that investor issuer community come together. I think that's at the forefront of both Republic and WeFunder. So super excited to try to continue that with anyone that's here.
God, I love you guys. You guys are awesome.
I was just
Okay.
gonna-
High five. Okay, I'm gonna wrap things up here. I think the one thing that I was hoping for you guys to kind of briefly touch on is, what does the future look like for WeFund Republic, or even the larger space? Like, what are we going to expect in the next 1 to 3 years?
I think it's already happening. I think you're already starting to see like bigger stage companies using the platform, companies of all different shapes and sizes. The future really originating or getting funding on our platforms is kind of just now almost standard. And I think you'd see a lot more companies just building a CF raise as part of their growth plan, and not necessarily for funding, as I touched on before, more on like, hey, what's the best way for me to engage with my customers? How do I then pay them back for years of engaging with my company? Things like that, I think, is going to be just much more commonplace. I think, as we touched on before, like there's a little bit of a stigma around the term crowdfunding. I think we're all moving away from that. And I would foresee in the next 1 to 3 years that being completely gone and being like, hey, this is just a regular thing that I'm going to do. And as a way to kind of either add onto your current round or do totally separate, or be like, hey, after doing a significant round, I want to go back and just help them out. So I think it would just be something that is just more commonplace. And then from 1 to 3 years, you're going to start seeing a lot more of these companies blossom and start really making some amazing products and really bring, hopefully, that future that we're seeing start to resonate with the investors come to life, and a lot of those changes changing. And maybe there'll be a new Elon Musk or whatever out there tweeting that came from one of our platforms in a much more positive way, and seeing a lot more positivity in the world. I think that's one of the things that we're really striving to bring into the universe on our platforms.
Agreed. I think you're going to see a lot of the normalization of it, and just people adopting it as part of their everyday strategy, both founders and then also just, individuals and people as part of their investment strategy. And, we're already seeing that today where, people are starting to make 3, 4, 5, 6 investments across multiple platforms and different companies. And it's a part of their financing strategy and saving strategy. And again, by democratizing access to the private markets, you are also contributing to sort of fixing, the wealth gap with a lot of people. By the time companies go, IPO, it's like all the rich people have already gotten richer. Now we're allowing everybody to get in. For the cost of like 6 lattes, I can be an angel investor and hold some equity in a company. And so, again, we're still in the early phases, but over the next 2-3 years, we're probably also going to see some great companies that have come through the funnel that go IPO or make some real significant impacts in the space where it's going to really send some ripples. And we're already seeing, as John said, some of these companies that have hundreds of millions of dollars raised from major, blue chip Sand Hill Road type VCs that are investing side by side with individuals that are unaccredited. And it's just, being a founder for 2+ decades, like if I go and start a new company, or the next time I start a new company, whenever that ends up being, I'm going to start here, and I'm going to always have a community-centered, democratized, decentralized ownership, structure from day one. It's not going to change.
That's brilliant. Okay, last 2 minutes. Any final words of wisdom, thoughts for any of our budding academic entrepreneurs or other entrepreneurs on the show?
I would just say, like, don't be afraid to just make it happen. Both of us are available to talk to you guys if you have any questions. I'm sure you're going to send our contact information over to them. Just reach out. Happy to sort of chat about where you're at, what's going on. As a founder and resident too, like I really do support our founders in a lot of stages, even prior to them officially working with us. I'll make introductions. I'll sort of like give feedback on various capacities. I'll think through some ideas from an outsider's perspective, having been there. At the end of the day, though, like the fact that you're even here on this webinar right now is awesome. It means you're thinking about commercialization or expansion or starting a new venture. I would also say, look around you, from the university perspective and your community perspective, and leverage connections to work together to fill in gaps that you're not really good at. One of the things that I always did is I hired really smart people around me, or I partnered with really smart people. I started this by saying, I just like to solve problems and work with really smart people and have fun. Okay. I am not a numbers guy. I can look at graphs and I can make awesome, actionable, great decisions. but don't ever ask me to make a financial model and figure all that stuff out. Okay, I'll work with like an MBA over here, right? Or if I need graphic design or whatever else, I'll like tap into the design department. So work with the people around you. It doesn't all have to be super, super formal in the beginning until, of course, you create, you know, the business and you register it out and you do all that stuff. But in the meantime, to move the needle forward, don't get stuck in the one thing that you can only do. Reach out, collaborate, and have some fun, because at the end of the day, beside all the ups and downs and the gray hairs, you know what, just, it is very rewarding to build something and bring something to market that wasn't there before and just make it happen.
Gray hairs, I'm jealous of that. No, but I would say, I guess my parting words, let's chat. I think there's just kind of the tip of the iceberg. I think this is kind of the beginning of the future of a lot of the companies that are here. Super appreciative of Vincent bringing this together. I didn't even touch on all the different things that we could do, like running the CF as the beginning. And then we have a whole portfolio team that makes a whole bunch of introductions, opens up partnerships, whole ecosystem we could open you up to. But there's nothing that I think that I can speak for Ben as well. Like nothing more that we love than speaking to founders and hearing all your awesome stories and trying to be a part of it and part of that journey to actually see how we can make you guys a future success.
We're here for.
Awesome. Ben, John, so appreciate you both. Again, I put your contact information for LinkedIn on the chat. So for those of you who would like to reach out, you've got a great idea, feel free to reach out to me too. Happy to make introductions over email. But that's a wrap, folks. So again, thank you all for joining us. Please do sign up for our next Confessions of event, which is next week. So, and take care.
Aloha.
Aloha. Bye, everyone.